Well, I'm getting guests next week too.
Okay, so the speaker is the microphone and the microphone is the microphone. So it should be good. Honey, do you hear us? Well, we don't see you, so you can't tell us if you hear us, but, okay, I'm assuming that you're gonna hear. It's fine. Yeah, it was Reba Newfield. It's not on yet. Should be on short. Okay. Yeah, I put it in the back. And I think they already,
Some people are coming. Hello, please join us. Okay. I'm getting grandchildren too, a grandson and a granddaughter. So there's some papers in the back. When you come in. All right, so we were in the 18th century, and we had finished a whole unit on the Hasidim and then the Misnagim, especially the best, and then go there Mezrish, and then how it all branched out to various Hasidic groups, and then we started with the Vilna Gaon. So I actually was looking through the books I have at home, and I discovered another book with some great stars. So you know some of them. Right here, let me move this so you have space.
Martin Kelbert.
Yeah, right. There. Hopefully we on Moses Mendelssohn, but I'm not sure. No. Does everybody have the one on the Jews of Central Europe? That's where we're going to be starting. No. All right. Yeah. You need? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. All right. So this I sort of, I get a few little places and I sort of compile it together for myself and everything. But I wanted to do before I just and that and let me get my notes handy. So I have everything. Some of the material is going to be coming. It's funny, my son was recommending this book to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have some stuff. It's called Out of the Ghetto, like they took cats and said it's like it should have like a standard in the field, right? Yeah. So I didn't even realize. Let me go through the maps so you know where they are. So let's do first, not the Shafai Tzvi because he comes later. Do the Chamalnitsky. Then we kept on talking about 60, 40, and 49. So it's the second page of the map. Here, you have the packet with the map? Let's go to the second map first, because this happens earlier. So you didn't get the map? Okay. Here, I have it. Okay. Okay. Some of them were as you came in, but you might not have noticed. So this is fun. All right. Anybody else need the map? You have the map. Okay. So first, look at these maps about Khmelnytsky. Those were those horrible, horrible massacres. Bogdan Khmelnytsky, he was the leader. He was a Ukrainian. He's a, and I wanted to show you, look how many cities, look how many were attacked. Why it was such a devastating experience for those Jews living in Poland. So it starts in the Ukraine. It was really, from his perspective, initially, a revolt against the noblemen. They felt that they were taking advantage of them and Cossacks, But then it became free for all. Let's just attack the Jews. But when I look at this map, it's like I could not believe how many cities were involved. So it says here, like here, there's like a little key up on the left corner. It says where there's a dot, black dot. Says those are the towns where anti-Jewish massacres took place. Look, it went all the way as far west as Posen in Poland, and it goes all the way north to where Vilna is and Kovno. And really, they believe that about 100,000 people were killed in these terrible, terrible massacres. And look how long ago we're talking, 1648, 49. Those are the years. They're called Gezerot Takat. That just stands for the dates. But it goes all the way to 1656 because then they decided to turn from Poland. The main focus was Poland. Take a map. There's on the table in the back. And then after that, they turned northward and they went to Lithuania. And then obviously, but look how far west. Yes. Oh, he's always been, There's Bogdan from this. Okay. And do you I don't think I've given this down. Well, we can have an extra, have a pen. Okay. So I just wanted to, what do you need? Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. I mean, there had been, you had to understand, just prior to that, 1618 to 1648 was this 30 years war, primarily in Germany. They also involved France and Austria, but primarily, and many Jews had left that part of Central Europe, and they went eastward to Poland. They thought, oh, things are good there and safe, and this is just the beginning. Just think how many Jews have been murdered here. Besides it being a Holocaust, we're talking about these things from 1648, 49. Then those awful programs that were coming in 1880. Your maps over there. Okay. And here, I don't know if you know, we do starting this unit. No, did you already check the first? Yeah, so she has. Okay. What's that? Well, the idea was to noblemen, attack but the noblemen vamoose, well, let's attack those Jews. They're the ones who are collecting the taxes, so whatever. It's a terrible, terrible situation. And that what we're going to learn is the ironic thing is, so those German Jews who had gone eastward to Poland, like after these horrible massacres, they're going to go south westward again. Some of them are going to go back to Germany. So, but we'll learn about that in a little bit. Okay, look at the first map. Okay, because this happens faster. This is Shaddai Tzvi. He was the false Messiah, but who got the hopes of his people all wrapped up. Oh, he's going to lead them back to Israel, and the redemption has come, and that he, in fact, is the Messiah. He is the Messiah. And you can read later, things that surrounded it, but it goes from 1620. Well, these are his dates, 1626 to 1676, but it's not going to start till after 1650. So they're like 20, 25 years. But in the end, I mean, this man was definitely balanced. He came from Turkey, came from Izmir in Turkey, spreading his ideas, and then he has this. I don't know if you told me about. It's an organization in Toronto called Torah in Motion. You told me. So have you been watching Shuli's thing about Gaza? Yes. Yeah, right. So anyway, so she talks about Nathan from Gaza, who was somebody who backed Shaddai. So it's just everything comes together. I think we can learn from different sources. We were in Salon. Oh, you were? Oh my God. Where he had gone? Yes. Yes,
Where this went to Spain.
yes, yes,
Turkey,
right.
all
Well,
over.
they're already there at this time period. They are 1492 into the 1500s. They're going to go eastward. Where Chuck B had lived. Ah, okay. Right. Well, he stayed in that whole area. And then eventually, though, he goes to Constantinople. He thinks he's going to convince the Sultan to accept. I mean, nervy, though he's promptly thrown into prison, and he eventually, just dies there. But you can imagine, this is the way I explain how the finisher movement grew, because they were so down in the dumps after this. Oh, they thought, oh my gosh, the redemption is coming, and we're going to be able to go back, yes, there must have been something extraordinary about this man, right? And that people just, I guess they were like, it's pausing, give you hope, right? Never was a very sad situation. And then after I told you there were some others, even going into the 1800s, into the 1900s, there were other Frankist movement, it was called. And so I just wanted to show you the maps and how it spread, because he goes all the way, his influence goes all the way to Amsterdam. They even have here, check with Shalom. Oh, Shalom is coming to actually visit me here in the United States with a little possible. I can't wait. They know him. So he's coming in February. So sometimes, he does it on the screen. Shalom, he's my youngest son. So he sometimes gives a lecture from London, via Zoom, but he's actually in person. I said, oh, would you like to? Well, I have to give him the dates, but I hope so. That would be really neat. So, I mean, besides being really an expert in Spanish, Portuguese, Jewish, community. Shalom. Nah. Right, but his little boy, because I have to strain to understand him sometimes, because he's little British. It's very, it's very, very cute. Yeah, they live in what's actually called the City of London, and he's the Rav of Bevis Mark Synagogue, which is the oldest synagogue. The same time that Shevet Israel in New York City was being founded, Bevis Marks was in London. So it's very interesting, yeah. All right, so I'll just show you what the other charts are that I have here from this book, which I told you I was going through my, I have this books are scattered all over the house because it's not so big where I live. So but I think I must have bought it in whenever I go up to New York to visit. So I found this fabulous book about the there's the two volumes. That one's the early Achronim and then the later Achronim. So these are coming from the later book. All right. We had finished last year the unit on those earlier Achronim. Now, I don't know what they're going to call the people living now and or after, but whatever these are the terms to describe Rabbanim that time period. So I just put here the Baal Shem Tov. He's the first. His name was Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer. Then who followed him? Who was chief? So, well, the main one is this Rabbi Dov Ber, who's the Maggid and Midrash. She's the main follower, and he's the one who's going to spread the idea of Hasidus, throughout Eastern Europe. Before, listen, this Rabbi Yaakov Yosef, he's the one who wrote down a lot of stories about the Baal Shem Tov, and that's how we have it. Rabbi Dover from Medrash, he talks more about the philosophy. So he talked, what stands behind the idea of Hasidus. And again, because of those horrible, first of all, those massacres, 1648-49, which go into 1650s, and then Shabtai Tzvi, with the people are at a terrible low. And that's why he can tells them, and it was very hard to, like the more prominent yeshivas now are going to be the ones in Lithuania. They had been the ones in Poland. And there still are, like Lublin. I mean, there still are yeshivas in Poland, but now it's going to be the really more top ones are going to be moving to Lithuania, or the ones that were there become more prominent. They attract the better students. And a lot of the Jews that lived in the southern part of Poland, they weren't as well educated. And I don't think they felt that they could possibly reach the heights Torah learning in the main yeshiva. And so they are the ones where the Hasidim come. Hasidim come, I mean, they spread elsewhere afterwards, but they initially begin in southern Poland, Galicia, right? That's where they have their stronghold. And then what I have listed after, we did discuss this last time, I'll give you, I'll make my own charts, giving you more information. But these are the main in that period, right after the Maggid Measures. There then are a gazillion and one, groups that follow even after these, but these were the main ones. All right, let's see, what's in the next chart that I have here for you? Oh, so then I also wrote, I have to look up the man's name, I forget. But he wrote here who were some of the very great contemporaries of the Vilna Gaon, who be in Lithuania. And some of the names might recognize, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put together like a list, the main Rabbanim here, and where they lived, obviously the dates, and the Sforim that they're famous for, But here is just a list of these key people. There are actually one or two names here that are actually even Sparta. But I'll give you mostly the Ashkenazi one. All right. Then the next table, again, just going to talk in general about the great Torah masters, the key Rabbanim from that 18th century. And that's the third chart. It says it's table 8, the Roman numeral. Okay. I don't, it's not which page. So here, this one, and then turn the page, the next chart. The chart after, turn the page. Yeah, there you are. That's where it says table DI. Wait. All right. And it starts off there again with the Vilna Gaon because he had such an impact on all the great Rabbanim who come out of Lita, which is Lithuania. And again, I will do more things. Then we'll talk about Chaim Volozhin, who was the key student of the Vilna Gaon, and he's going to be the founder of Volozhin Yeshiva. And then other individuals. But again, I'm going to do this, in more detail, but I just wanted to give you these charts so you can see. And then just in general, we had another nice chart about the 50, great 18th century, but it's a combination of Rabbanim from different places. But just to show you, I'm sure you will recognize some of the names. And very often you go to a lecture and somebody will be quoting from so-and-so, and well, for that, right, same thing. I never knew, well, where are these people? Where do they live and where do they come from? But now you have a chart so you can say these and have reference, to it when somebody brings it. Okay, but now we're going to turn to Central Europe. We're going to turn to my things here. All right. Oh, okay. I think this is it. Very different. Going to be very different in Central Europe. Okay. So I'll take some of this with you, and then I'm going to add a lot of things. Yes, in the 18th century, big changes are going on. A lot of it's going to start in France and in England. Here, I'll just list some of the names. This is going to be the time period will be called the age of reason, or the age of enlightenment, right? And that's going to lead them to what we'll call the age of emancipation. This is when all of a sudden it's going to be a weakening of the monarchy, of the king, a weakening of the church. So instead of looking to them and just observing all their rules and regulations, emphasis on man himself, his thought processes, and you'll say, and this will give rise to, well, this was the enlightened, right? Right? They're using their reason, right, to figure out things, what to do. And this will eventually be a call for emancipation. It should be equal rights for all men. And so it's not a movement that started by Jews, but you can imagine how this appealed to them. Oh my God, equal rights. Yes, we also, we also want to be a part of this movement. Let me just mention some of the names from this time period. And also the idea that one should rely on law, that's, thing. A lot of it starts actually in the 17th century. I'm sure you've heard of Descartes. He wrote Discourse on the Method of the Road. He's the one who has come to that famous phrase, I think, therefore I am, so that there's merit, to the individual, and that it's not like the church or the monarchy will always set, how one should behave. But every individual has that right to think on his own, decide what he wants to do. It's also a time period of Sir Isaac Newton. Of course, that's more math, but also the idea of thinking independently, not just doing things that have been done for the past hundreds of years. And the main time frame, though, will be more into the 18th century. So I'm not going to affect the Jews until later 18th century, but the movement is going to begin, in greater depth, by the non-Jewish world. And it says actually it starts from the death of Louis the 14th. He's the one with presses, paintings, or copies of the paintings. Actually, it's pretty amazing when you travel through Europe and you stop at a museum, and oh my God, the things that were like in your history textbooks, there they are. You see the originals. So it's pretty exciting.
Maria.
No, that's later, the 16th. He's the 16th, right? But this is Louis the 14th, all right? With Versailles. Yeah, a lot of excesses in his court, and it goes all the way, though, until the French Revolution, which that's considered like the height. But actually, we Americans, we started it first. We had the American Revolution, 1776. So kind of bear in mind when we're talking about now these Jews living either in Eastern Europe or Central Europe. And at the same time, look what's going on in the United States. I mean, they're putting into practice all these ideas and ideals that are coming, though, out of France and England. Okay. For example, there's Thomas Hobbes. I'm talking about some of the British, great thinkers from this time period. John Locke. Okay, a lot of like the Declaration of Independence and his writings. Adam Smith. But there are going to be some later French scholars from this time period, and I'm sure you've heard of them. And that's like Montesquieu, Rousseau, Voltaire, right? So Voltaire, by the way, was a big anti-Semite, but yeah, equal rights for everybody except the Jews, right? Exactly. So just to give you basic thing, I'm not here to teach, general world history, but you have to understand the backdrop of what's going on, in the world. So it's all starting in Western Europe, primarily France and England. England already is actually more advanced. But I'm thinking, of the independence of man. Well, and then of course it's the colonies, America. But France is now like they've had like with their king and the church. They're very anti-religion. And I think maybe in a certain way, this also has an impact on Jews at that time. Because we'll learn, like at the end of the 18th, into the 19th century, it'll be the beginning of the Reform movement. It starts actually in Germany. Those Jews living in Eastern Europe, the Haskalah doesn't come to them. I know Haskalah is a word for enlightenment. That won't come to them till later into the 18th century, more the latter part of even the 19th. And then we have a lot to talk about. All right, so let's move back. 18th century, Central Europe. So you could sort of follow with me as I read. Okay. While Hasidism was rising in Eastern Europe and causing a rift within the large Jewish population living there, as you know, because that's the whole thing I did with the Hasidim versus the Misnadim versus the Hasidim. You know, this big uproar. The Jews of Central Europe were gradually finding a place in the economic place of their homeland. Now, until Poland, started attracting so many Jews, the 14th, 15th, 16th century, the largest Jewish community had been more in Germany. I mean, we know already those Spartan, who have moved into the Ottoman Empire and other parts of the world. But most of the great Rabbonim in the medieval time, or either from the Alsace-Lorraine region in France, or later it's going to move into Germany. There's a lot of prominent Rabbonim there. They were being called out of their ghetto prisons. Actually, that's the book I told you called Out of the Ghetto. Times were really terrible. Germany is broken up into many, many principalities at this time. There's no one strong king, which you'll see, will come into being. But at that point, so the Jews were expelled from one place to the other. There was all these rules and restrictions about them. So it really was, that's why you can understand why they all start migrating eastward, because in Poland, at least in those earlier years, they are welcomed in, and their rights as Jews are protected. All right, that's all going to change, but it was initial, those first few hundred years when they started migrating. Okay, so now they'll make use of some Jews, those with wealth, and they're going to be called out of their ghettos. They're going to help to rebuild those lands. First of all, even some of the fighting that's going on is being financed by Jews. The king or the duke, of a certain area will appeal to them. They need funds, various battles and wars. They didn't like the Jews, but they liked the money. Right, okay. So especially after the 30-year war period, they're going to turn to them, but only limited numbers of Jews. A few of them received the thanks of the rulers. Others obtained some slight relief from poverty and restriction, but of complete freedom, there was as yet no sign. It's not until more into the 19th century. I mean, if you meet German Jews, from the period of the Holocaust, they're very proud Germans. I'm not sure why they're called Yetis. Does anybody know? Because why? Oh. Yes. Oh, very rigidly? Yeah. Oh. Yes. Oh, it's interesting. Well, my sister-in-law comes from a German family. My father used to call them the aristocrats. I mean, they weren't pompous or anything, but you're right. There's a certain way they held themselves. But a lot of it is, I mean, you can speak. Well, now I don't remember anymore, but I do remember hearing survivors of the Holocaust who came from Germany, and they were like, even after the Holocaust, they were like really proud of their German heritage. And I don't mean necessarily even Jewish, just German. Okay. Oh, right, right. But they would talk about how beautiful, and it is. Never been there personally. I've been interested in going there. But, there are some regions that are really gorgeous, the mountains, forests, the cities, right, were highly filled with culture and this what happened. All right, I'm now in second paragraph. Okay, so the Christian population continued in its custom hostility. Nothing's changes. We're going to make use of these Jews, of whatever money they have. We're going to be borrowing from them. But hey, we still hate them. And even though there are these new ideas that are going to filter in, these ideas that I mentioned of the Enlightenment, the age of reason, they're going to, and will affect a more, number of people in Germany. But obviously, the bulk of the population was part of that, and of course, the church for sure. So the ideas of the Besh, that's Baal Shem Tov, and the Gaon were answering the needs of the Jews during Europe. But among the Jews in Central Europe, there's actually, I'm going to give a separate unit on Jesse Moses Mendelssohn. He's going to be a very prominent Jewish individual from that latter half century. He felt, with his good and positive relations with a lot of the higher thinking non-Jews, that he's going to make inroads and there will be major changes in the relationship between two people. All right, he sought to revive the Jewish spirit, blah, blah, blah. All right, unfortunately, his methods failed, because for this to work, you have to have a non-Jewish population to agree to it. Wait, here, do you need, so you took the math? Here, I know this was from last week. I don't know if you have it. The Jews of Central Europe. If you don't have it, I have it. Please help yourself. Okay. Well, look at the third paragraph. So Central Europe emerged from the calamity of 30 Years' War, greatly diminished in population. I told you, so many of them had moved eastward to live in Poland. Here, would you like this? I don't know if you have it from, I do believe I gave it out. Oh, that other lady's not even there. Look, it's being recorded. So. Yeah, I'm in the third paragraph of that first page. They were disorganized economically and everything. I told you the entire country is broken up into small states. The largest of these states actually is Austria. It wasn't Germany, Austria, whose king was called the Emperor of the whole Holy Roman Empire. It was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. That's how it's described. All right. The next in size was Prussia, right, which is the largest province of Germany. It will rise to be the most powerful one, but especially later in the 19th century under Bismarck, whose ruler in 1700 changed his title of elector to that of king. But they were still called electors, some of them. There are literally hundreds of semi-independent principalities, cities, and bishoprics. So sometimes it would be, say, a duke or a prince who was in charge. Sometimes it would be a member of the church who was in charge, And then the cities themselves sort of govern themselves, individually. And the common people, of course, had no say whatsoever. Most of the people are peasants, right? The cities are growing. You definitely will have, but even so, they're always, or even today, right? Who are we? Supposedly we have that power to vote. So, I don't know how much, impact we as individuals actually have on the government. Okay, and the rulers, all they were interested in was taxing. Naturally, they always wanted money. And they conducted war. So again, that was part of the reason why they needed all these extra funds. And they lived in as grand a style as possible. Again, I've never been to Germany and or Austria. Again, I have no interest in going. But I've looked at some pictures of their palaces. Oh my God, like castles. Oh my God, they are gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I always did one they're so expensive, but you can take these river cruises, and then you'll see I read about it. So I'm not going, but I read about it. It sounds very good. Okay, now we're on the second page. All right. The rulers are not the only ones who are interested in their own authority. Now we're going to go to the towns, which are growing in size, and the Jews are going to be attracted. Remember, the Jews don't own. They're urban dwellers. They're living in the city. The town burghers, again, this would be, the town authorities, were equally bound to the old way of doing it. They don't want to change. So from the medieval time, everything should be the same. So they greatly fear any changes in ways of dealing with commerce and industry, which will affect trade. Okay, that's where you'll see how the Jews are going to have their inroads. But the reigning, rulers in these individual towns, they don't want change. That's why they're going to have much prevent the Jews moving in. The guilds regulated everything, and of course, Jews were not joining the guilds, so you couldn't have like a son who become an apprentice, to learn, some other skill. So mostly just Christian. And they regulated everything from the price of the smallest article to the rights of succession, right? Who's going to take over? Only there had to be part of to make advances. Okay, but there's always, that desire to aggrandize, to increase, the trade and commerce, because this is going to bring more money into it. So they are open to those ideas, but the people who were in charge, they wanted it to be just their own crowd, right? Not the Jews. Now we're going to learn about Frederick William, who was the elector of Russia, and how he's going to interact with the Jews. England and Holland now this is what they're observing. You're in Germany, and they're observing what's going on in the rest of Western Europe. I mean, to them, the Eastern European people, they're, those serfs, those nothing, they're uncultured, they're nothing really to admire in what's going on in Europe. I mean, in Russia is growing at this time period of power and prestige, but they're looking down their noses actually at anything coming from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, right? And this is Central Europe. So they're seeing what's going on. What have those Western European countries, what have they been doing during this time? Well, this was following the age of exploration. And they are, conquering new lands and bringing new wealth into their country. The Germany is thinking, it's a good idea, patted ourselves on them. So meanwhile, we know about England and Holland. Doesn't talk of here. They don't have as much to do with Spain and Portugal, but they're the ones who colonized all of South America, Central and South America. And yeah, part of it there. They settled. They were the first actually Europeans to come to Florida. But they're seeing how powerful these countries are. I don't think they're looking so much to Spain because it's also looking down their noses, at the Spanish and the Portuguese, and eventually they are going to lose power as time goes on. But England, Holland, some French also, but particularly I think they have more of an affinity. They never like, but England and Holland, they did admire very much. The rest of Europe resisted. Progress remained standing still. Alone among the princes of the continent was Frederick, who was the elector of Prussia. Look at his dates. Now, this is still 17th century, but the latter half, 1649 to 1688. Frederick saw the need for reforming the economic conditions of his country by breaking the stranglehold of the guild. I'm never going to advance unless we're going to make changes in our economy and how we're running everything. Strong and capable while also being brutal, cunning, and ruthless, he soon gained for himself the title of Grand. It was thanks to him Prussia started on the road to military and political power. And these were the changes he forced in the economic order of his plan. Now, let's see how this is not going to impact on the Jews. As one of the means to achieve his ends, the great elector made use of his Jews. Like, his kids. It's like in medieval times, everybody had to belong to somebody. So the Jews were, so to speak, the property of the king. Despite the destructive results of the 30 Years' War, the burghers, again, the cities, did not slacken their control of Prussia's economic life. But he felt it was archaic. They're stifled with all their rules and regulations. Whenever there was the slightest suspicion of competition by the Jews, the guilds exercised their power to force the Jews out. I mean, and this is part of the reason why the Jews will go from principality to principality, and that's why eventually Eastern Europe is going to be attractive, to many of them. The great elector now began to play a very shrewd game. He was going to play. The Jews are going to be the pawns between the two sides. He granted the Jews certain trading privileges, now in one locality, now in another. The guilds, on behalf of the burghers, reacted by making vigorous protests. What do you think? What do you think you're doing? We're in charge of this particular industry, but he's going to, he's the most powerful person, in the land, and he's going to allow the Jews to go into certain occupations. Again, mostly dealing with trade and commerce. And then he would use, the Jews as a means to bargain, with these various townspeople, either to gain great authority for himself or just to make changes in the general economic situation. Now you can imagine, sometimes they would give privileges to people, sometimes they would take them away. And imagine what upheaval this is to you. I mean, these regulations determined where you could live, where you could not live, how many people you could have in your family at the time. Once, so you had to get permission to get married. You had to have permission to, let's say, to have as many children as you wanted, and how many of them could still remain living in your, as they grew to maturity. Well, they had to leave. You only want X number of Jews in our area. Okay, so as they say, can imagine how difficult, what upheaval there was in the lives of the Jews. On the other hand, the Jews now, they're going to be involved more in international commerce. Now, this starts already way back when we talk about the Jews in the medieval times, early medieval times, how they were in charge of the commerce in the Mediterranean Sea. But then the Italians going to gradually, take that over from the Jews. But we're just known over the centuries as being good business people and dealing with not just necessarily commerce within a certain locale, but international. And part of that, when we talked about, so when we learned about the earlier, period, we're talking about more 1300s, 1200, 1300s, because we had Jews, which is Hebrew. And so you could trade with somebody in another country and communicate with them by writing to them in Hebrew, and they would, return in kind. So I mean, even to this day, I mean, if you go someplace and you meet a Jewish person. I mean, I remember I was actually with Sean in Rome, and we stopped by, so we wanted to get like Sony scarves. We stopped and went, and I realized it was Jewish. Oh, well, then the price went down. So, it's nice to have these connections. Oh, not here. These are not. No, German Jews are not Spartan at all.
I know, but I mean,
Some of them, that was in the earlier days. But gradually, under the Ottoman Empire, the Jews are going to become,
Even us.
no, they're just not going to be as powerful. They're the the Ottoman Empire, like it reached its peak in its early century, and after that, it just starts going down. So it's going to impact the Jews also who are involved. And then the trade is going to be taken over, by Europeans. It's not going to be people from the Levant. Um, and that's just how things are over time. Okay. All right. So they became involved with some of the Jews with wholesale trading. Did you used to go to the Lower East Side? I don't know how they found anything in those stores. They were these little tiny stores, merchandise up to the ceiling, and they would, you ask them, I don't know, let's say for sweater, blanket, like they knew exactly where their stock was, but it wasn't like you could browse through these. So in any case, they became involved with wholesale trading and the manufacture of new articles, different things that people, would store that the guilds didn't have a hold of, but now the Jews could go in because it was a new industry. And the Jews of the late 17th century, this is interesting, did for the economic welfare of Germany of their days, we're talking about more now than 600, what their ancestors, I told you those from, going back into, earlier days had done. It said, where they say for 1,000, for whatever, for hundreds and hundreds. They made life, being involved in commerce, industry, it made life easier for the masses of the Jewish population. They helped, it was the Jews who helped Germany recover from the effects, the destructive effects of that 30 years war. Now, how we're going to see through it, how does this happen? But the general population, the regular German, refused to see any connection between their improved situation and the economic activity of the Jews. They preferred to listen to the complaints of the burghers that the Jews were taking away profits, which would otherwise have gone into the pockets of local Christians. So, sometimes people say, well, how would the Holocaust ever study history? I mean, this anti-Semitic attitude, it's there, like here in our country. No improvement was made, though, into the conditions under which the Jews lived. They still had to live in those ghettos. And a lot of places, I told you, they wouldn't even allow Jews to dwell in their, particular area, or they would expel them for a while. Then maybe 10 years would pass, they would allow them in. The right of residence, was restricted to the oldest son, while the remaining children had to seek homes elsewhere as they came of age. So, when your son, I tend to think of it as being 18. I'm not sure what they thought. The time was they had to leave. They couldn't stay anymore. They couldn't stay anymore in Hamburg. They had to move them to Frankfurt. But it was terrible. And they had to pay a tax whenever they would go from one, area to another area. And they were very, very heavy taxes. They say here that some Jews were able to participate. Some went to the University of Frankfurt on the Oder, but very limited. No, so I wouldn't say that's granting of rights when you let in 5 people, to your university. Now, the main means of communication between the Jews and the ruling authorities was through the court Jew, right? A small number of Jews during this period played a very significant role. And again, we're talking about individual people, a very small numbers of people. The rest of the people are obviously lower middle class, and some obviously poor. But there are a few very, very wealthy Jews, and they were the ones initiating the changes between the emperor, the elector, at that time. Became customary for the princes of Germany to make use of a Jew as their private financial advisor. The very helplessness of the Jew made him more trustworthy, right? He couldn't rely on his regular, you know, Germans because each one's going to try to outdo the Jew. His whole livelihood, his whole life depends, on the elector or the king or the duke of a particular. They knew that the Jew was always in his personal, and the Jew's life and property depended on the guarantee. Only with his permission, can we live here, can we work here. So there was hardly a ruler without his court Jew. Now you might recognize some of the names. Such a Jew, so on page 4, if you're following. Such a Jew had rights of residence anywhere within the state and had the right to travel without being hampered by restrictions. Now, every other Jew could not do this. You could not just, of course, go right ahead. You can't just get on a stage and start, traveling to another principality. You would, first of all, have to get permission, and then you'd have to pay taxes. But these court Jews, again, because of their prominence, they were able to travel more freely. And also the guilds couldn't tell them what to do. And these privileges would dribble down to their families and to their employees. And they would sometimes get other Jews permission to move with things wherever they were because they said, well, we need them, blah, blah, blah. So then, the ruler, whoever he might be, would give permission for it. Listen, you can't just hire a Jew, he needs his minion. So, either you could say they were family members or they're experts in a particular field, so that's how little by little, some of these Jewish communities would grow. Okay. It says a number of places where Jews formerly, right, were forbidden to live, now new communities. This is interesting. And Berlin is one of these communities. Now, Berlin is this large, cosmopolitan European city, but Jews only started being able to live there, right, into the 18th century. And when the Jews were expelled from Vienna in 1670, or at this, talking about 17th century, the great elector picked from among the refugees. Who has the money? I will invite them to come, and live in my area. And Berlin, of course, is the capital, invites them to live. Until then, listen to this. Jews had not been permitted to step foot in Berlin for more than a century. Wow. But now he's going to make you invite them back. I'll just finish up a little bit. A few years after the Jews had been expelled from Vienna on the ground that their presence was harmful to Christianity. I think Christianity is harmful to Jews, but okay, then first, right? The emperor invited Samuel Oppenheimer. Have you heard the name Oppenheimer? We actually in our community, Oppenheimer. I don't know if they can trace it back to this man. Come and settle there. Throughout all these very expensive wars, which Austria was carrying on then against Turkey, Oppenheimer, right? If you ever look at the map of Europe, I mean, Austria is very close, like to that Balkan area, okay, and that point that's being controlled by the Ottoman, Turks at this time. So they would have a lot of skirmishes, I remember my mother told 1453, of course, that's 15th century, but like that at that point, the Ottoman Turks no longer could go more into Europe, right? It finally came, because they just kept on, moving from territory to territory. But beyond that, they never passed beyond Vienna. Okay. So what was Oppenheimer's thing? He, as the court Jew, he provided the supplies for the and so not just providing money, but they would make sure that they would get supplies. Again, I think through the interactions from one Jew to another Jew. Okay, things are bad here. I need more lumber. I need more guns, more ammunition, whatever. Through their connection, right, with other Jews, they were able to get these supplies, and then that's how Emperor used them. So this Oppenheimer provided this. He was very efficient. And because he needed people to help him in his expanding, trade, the more Jews, we then give him permission to move there. On the other hand, then members of the church were very opposed to this. What do you mean the more you're allowing more Jews into our territory? Look at the last sentence. The emperor was deeply in debt to Oppenheimer. In addition, no Christian could be found with equal ability and an equal willingness to take risks. So, even though the church is very much opposed to more and more Jews moving in, the emperor, this guy, they're talking about Vienna, the elector who's in Germany and Berlin, and who's in Vienna. But when the Jews are going to be expelled officially, so it's not like a whole group of Jews could move there. Only these 4 Jews were invited, and then whatever entourage they needed, in their work, were given permission. But it wasn't like these were large Jewish communities, and that's only going to be in the 18th century. Okay, good. Pause here because I see the time is getting closer to 11. Be well, and Mr. Shen, I will see you next week. Even with my grandchildren coming to visit. With my class. Yeah, because anything extra you have. Otherwise, save them because we will be using. Yeah, save everything I give you. Because we will soon use some of the stars. Okay. Everybody else has stuff? Okay. All right. Be well, everybody. Okay, let me figure all this out. Wait a second. I just have to turn it off. Sorry.